What's up, guys? Welcome to Film Trash. 2024 is finally here, so I wanted to give you guys my list of my top 10 favorite movies of 2023. Now, this is just my opinion on these movies. You're welcome to have a different opinion. I'm not telling you that these are, without a doubt, the best. I'm sure people will disagree with me on a few of them, so again, just my opinion. However, before I get into my top 10, I wanted to tell you about a few of the movies that I watched this year that didn't make it into my top 10. So first up is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Yeah, this movie was absolutely terrible. I don't recommend it at all. It was nothing more than a cash grab because Winnie the Pooh entered the public domain, so somebody made a horror movie out of it. And actually, it was just announced on literally January 1st. Steamboat Willie, that version of Mickey Mouse, became public domain, and somebody has already announced that they're making a horror film about it. Next up was Megan. Not a great movie, not a terrible movie, it was just a horror movie. That's pretty much it. Nothing to say about it. Same goes for Cocaine Bear. I thought that one was at least kind of funny, so that was better than Megan. But then there was Renfield. Renfield I actually did enjoy. Not a big Nicolas Cage fan, but Renfield wasn't bad. It just wasn't good enough to make it into my top 10. And finally, It Lives Inside. Another one that was, again, not a bad horror film. It wasn't anything too original, but it was still a good horror film. So, with those out of the way, here are my top 10 favorite movies of 2023. Starting off with number 10, Evil Dead Rise. I love the Evil Dead franchise. I really like the 2013 remake. I know some people don't like that one as much because it wasn't as cheesy as the originals. But I liked it. Evil Dead Rise, it was kind of in between, in my opinion, the original series and the remake, where the original series was more goofy and fun, and the remake was much more serious. This one was fairly serious, but also had some kind of goofy moments. So I think it was a fun movie, it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I do just wish that it would have picked to go a little bit goofier or a little bit more serious, you know, it was kind of right in between. I wish it would have went more one way or the other. But still, a good movie that I enjoyed. And then coming in at number 9, I have Knock at the Cabin. I really liked this movie. I thought it was a great story. I thought it was really well acted. I was quite surprised because I'm not a big Shyamalan fan. Obviously, The Sixth Sense is a classic, but other than that, I didn't really care for most of his films that he's made. And I think with this one, I really enjoyed it because it didn't feel like there was really a twist, like there kind of is, but not really, I guess. I don't know. Spoiler alert, the twist is that the 4 people that come to the cabin are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, but it didn't really feel like a twist because it was kind of obvious. The only complaint I really have about the film was they made it a little too obvious. I haven't read the story that this movie was based on, but I've heard that in the original story there were a few planes falling out of the sky, and it was like, oh, that's weird. Is it a coincidence that there's a few planes falling out of the sky, or is it something beyond that? Whereas in the movie it was like every plane is falling out of the sky, and at that point you're like, okay, well, obviously this isn't just a coincidence. If every plane is falling out of the sky, then something is happening. So I think in that aspect it was just a little too obvious, but otherwise I still really enjoyed the film. Alright, coming in at number 8 is Talk to Me. This was a really good horror film. It felt like a fairly original film. It was a lot of fun. I think it's really cool that this film was made by YouTubers. I don't know Raka Raka, the guys who made it. I don't know anything about them. I haven't really seen their channel, but I watched the film and I was really surprised because I've heard of a few other horror films or films that other YouTubers have made, and they're always really terrible. Once again, I haven't seen any of them, but I've seen reviews. They're always terrible, so I was really surprised at how good this was. Very good film. I think in a different year, it might have even been a little bit higher on my list, but there was just a lot of really good movies that came out this year. Which brings us into number 7, and this one might be a little bit controversial to put above Talk to Me, but it's Thanksgiving. Yes, Thanksgiving is cheesy. It's sort of a throwback to the old 80s slasher films, But I had so much fun watching this film. I think it was pretty well made too. Some great acting, the sort of whodunit aspect that you used to get with some of the old slashers, where you're never quite sure who the killer is. I think they did a really good job of that. I figured it out before the reveal, but it wasn't very long before the reveal. So I think they did a pretty good job of kind of keeping you guessing. In a way. I didn't know till close to the end who it was, but there are a lot of points in the film where they're kind of hinting at, like, hey, maybe it's this person, like, oh, this person has a motive. And every time they did, it felt a little too obvious, and I was like, well, it's not that guy, because you're making it way too obvious that it could be him, so I know it's not. So, I mean, in that aspect, they didn't do a good job, but I definitely didn't suspect the person that it was. So then again, it was just a lot of fun. Some cool gore, cool kills, 80s slasher throwback. Just good fun. So that was number 7 on my list. So number 6 is Infinity Pool. I still have not watched Brandon Cronenberg's earlier film Possessor. I started watching it and I fell asleep and haven't gotten around to finishing watching it. So I gotta do that at some point. I love David Cronenberg, of course. And Infinity Pool was really fantastic. It was such a great and interesting and original concept. I love Mia Goth. She's been so great in everything I've seen her in lately. And Alexander Skarsgård as well. Just fantastic film all around. So I would highly recommend it. And like I said, I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch Possessor at some point. Brandon Cronenberg's earlier film. Because Infinity Pool is fantastic. Alright, that brings us to number 5. This one actually was number 6 at one point. And then I watched it a second time in theaters and moved it up to number 5. And then I watched it a third time in the theater, and I considered moving it up again because it is such an amazing film, and I almost feel bad that I'm leaving it down at number 5. But it's Godzilla Minus One. Yeah, this movie is amazing. Japan obviously created Godzilla. They've done so many great Godzilla movies in the past. Shin Godzilla a few years ago, I think it was back in 2016. Amazing film if you haven't seen it. The American versions from Legendary Pictures. If you've seen my review of Godzilla Minus One, you already know I loved it. And I think that Legendary Pictures could learn a thing or two. But yeah, Godzilla Minus One is it's such a good movie. I could go on and on about it, but I'm not going to here because, like I said, I already did a Godzilla Minus One review. If you want to know more about my thoughts on the movie, go and watch that video. I'm just going to say here that it is a fantastic movie. So, with that being said, let's move on to number 4, Beau is Afraid. I know a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy for this, and I'm sure there's people that are going to agree with me on this. Beau is Afraid is a fantastic movie. I feel, and this is just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, I don't know. But I think that the people that don't like Beau is Afraid are people who didn't really get it. And I'm not saying that I get Beau is Afraid, like, hey, I know everything about it and it makes total sense to me. It's a crazy movie, but it's a very surreal movie. And I think that's something that people have to think about when they watch it. Most of the time, most people, when they go to a movie theater, they expect the movie to portray events obviously not realistically. We're not, it's not real life. The things that happen in a lot of action movies aren't realistic. They can't actually happen. But it's presented in a realistic manner. And I think that a lot of people just don't think about a movie as a surreal experience. You can watch something in a movie that doesn't make any sense in real life, but it has meaning within the context of the movie, and that's what you have to look for in a movie like Beau is Afraid. Back when I was a teenager, I'm not sure how old I was. I want to say I was around like 12 or 13. I watched Natural Born Killers, and before watching that, I had never really seen anything with any sort of surreal aspects to it, or nothing that I remembered anyways, other than maybe like, Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but that's like, it's in a dream, so you can kind of forgo like the the realism of it, because it's a dream world. Of course anything can happen in the dream world. But other than that, like, surrealist films weren't a thing that I had seen before. And I think it was really the first film that I watched with surrealist aspects that made me realize that movies can be more than just entertainment. They can be art. And I think Beau is Afraid is art. It is a portrayal of a man who has serious problems, anxiety, depression, all these things, and this movie is not portraying the world around him in a realistic way. It's portraying the world around him the way he sees it in his head, the way he imagines it in his head. And that's really what you have to go into this movie thinking about. Is it's not realistic. It's his vision of the world, and the things that he is afraid of, and the things that he thinks could happen. And once you look at it that way, I think it's a really fantastic film. But I think you have to be able to do that. And I'm sure that, like I said, I'm sure some people will disagree with me on that. I'm sure some people will say, no, even viewing it that way, it's a terrible movie. It's a mess, and it doesn't make any sense. And like I said, this is just my opinion. I loved the movie, and it definitely deserved to be number 4 on my list. Moving on to number 3, Barbie. So this one is obviously a huge film. It was a huge blockbuster, made a ton of money, and there was the whole meme going around of Barbenheimer, film bros wanting to see Oppenheimer and Barbie. And I was definitely one of those guys. I went into it. I absolutely loved Barbie. Everything about it is just great. Great acting, great cinematography. Everything about it was fun. It also had a great message that I think more people need to watch and think about. But all in all, it was just a fun and fantastic and well-made movie. It definitely deserves to make all the money that it made. And then some. So I won't be surprised if it wins some big awards this year. But obviously the second half of Barbenheimer is Oppenheimer, which brings me to number 2, Oppenheimer. The film bro thing was absolutely true for me. I loved Oppenheimer. It wasn't exactly what I expected, and maybe that's why it's not number 1 on my list. It was number 1 on my list for a little while. But the biggest problem I had with it was just that Christopher Nolan was calling it basically a horror film, and people were saying like, oh, the last 45 minutes or half hour, whatever, was basically a horror film, and it was horrifying. And honestly, I didn't think it was that horrifying. Maybe it's because I love horror movies and I watch horror movies a lot, but I didn't think it was a horror movie or terrifying at the end. I'm not sure what they were referring to, honestly. But it was definitely a great movie. I didn't know anything about Robert Oppenheimer going into it. So it was really, really cool and interesting to see this whole story about how all of this stuff came to be, how the bomb was created, and all the scientists involved, and all the controversy surrounding it too. It was just a really incredibly well-made movie. I'm a big fan of Christopher Nolan as well, so that definitely helps. But great movie, and once again, I wouldn't be surprised if it won a bunch of awards this award season. So, all right, that brings me to number 1, and this one seems to be a little bit controversial. I've noticed a lot of people say that they didn't really like this movie as much as the director's other movies because they think that he's a little too much up his own ass, I guess. And that movie is Asteroid City. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you probably know I love Wes Anderson. I love his style. I love his movies. I love his quirky characters. And it's really the characters that I think really pull me in. And Asteroid City had some of the best characters in any of his films, in my opinion, that I've seen. There's still a few of his films that I haven't seen. I need to get on watching them and check them off my list. But as far as the movies I've seen of his, this is definitely one of my favorite Wes Anderson films. I do think it's a little bit strange, the whole it's a movie inside of a screen. I don't know. It's the framing device was a bit strange, and I didn't quite get the point of it. But the actual stuff about Asteroid City, It was just so much fun. Well, I was almost finished talking about Asteroid City, and then my camera suddenly died. So, anyways, as I was saying, Asteroid City is fantastic. I love this movie. I don't care what other people say. Like I said, I literally saw a review where somebody said that Wes Anderson was up his own ass. I don't think so. I think it's great. Definitely my favorite movie of 2023. And honestly, I think my entire top 5, any other year, or if I was in any other mood, I think any of those top 5 could probably be number 1 in their own way. They're all really fantastic. So 2023 was a great year. I'm really looking forward to 2024 and seeing what that brings. There were some other movies that came out this past year that I really wanted to watch, and I didn't get a chance to either because I just didn't have time or they weren't playing near me. Poor Things was one that I was really looking forward to, and it hasn't been playing here where I live. Ferrari is one I've been really wanting to watch, so hopefully I'll get a chance to watch some of those other ones soon, and I will definitely be keeping track of all the movies I watch in 2024 so I can do this again next year, because it's a lot of fun. I like talking about my favorite movies and hearing what you guys think, what your favorite movies of the year were. And please feel free to comment down below and let me know what your favorite movies were of this year. And while you're at it, down in the description below there is a link to my merch store if you want to get some Film Trash merch, like this giant banner I have behind me, or shirts, or whatever. Anything you want to buy, really cool, helps me out. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you guys next time.